This is the story of Shawn Betz shortly after the 33rd anniversary of this young man going missing. This case is a little bit different from all the other cases we've presented here, because I was blessed to be able to work directly with the family and one of the channel subscribers, Commercial Forest. Shawn was 11 on January 20th, 1988, and it had been a relatively normal day right up until the end. Shawn was hanging out at the local pizza place, the Pizza Chalet, with the chalet owner's son. While his mother didn't know Shawn's new friend very well, the Pizza Chalet was a favorite local hangout, and his mother felt safe knowing where her son would be that night. He planned to go with a friend to a game, and he was excited to run into his mother in the parking lot near the chalet so he could do what kids his age always do, ask for money. It felt like any other day. Shawn's mother, Barbara, went with him into the chalet, and Shawn made his plea for change so that he could play games inside of the Pizza Chalet. Shawn wasn't displaying any signs of distress. In fact, his sister also popped by for a few minutes, and Shawn took it upon himself to start joking around, attempting to fix his sister Pam up with the good-looking guy behind the counter. It didn't work, however. The Pizza Chalet worker was leaving town for college the next day. Shawn got his money and permission to go to the game, but the plan hit a hitch when they arrived at the school to find out it was an away game. The disappointed boys turned back around and spent the rest of the evening at the Pizza Chalet instead. Later, the owners would tell the police and the family that Shawn hung out there until about 9 p.m., heading home alone afterwards. The 11-year-old boy seemingly disappeared into thin air. But we all know no one really disappears. Something happened to him, and somebody knows something. His family is desperate for that answer. His parents were alarmed when Shawn didn't return home. They frantically searched for him and waited up all night, but heard and found nothing. So they did what anyone would do, and they called the police. They shared with me that unfortunately that went sideways pretty fast. The responding officer told the family that the 11-year-old boy simply ran away, and he would come back home when he got hungry. Adding into the equation, Shawn had gotten into a fight with a classmate and had tangled with the law, and as a result he had a court date coming up. This may have had something to do with the officer's incorrect assumption about running away. However, the family tells me that they did show the officer that none of Shawn's belongings were gone. He wasn't worried about the upcoming court date. They knew for sure he hadn't left because Shawn's blanket was inside. And Shawn desperately needed to sleep with that blanket every night. He never would have left it home if he had planned on leaving. That blanket was still laying on his bed. Despite this, the officer was adamant that Shawn ran away, and there was no point in doing more. Don't worry, he'll be back soon. Even the creepy phone call the next day didn't change his mind. However, this call did further alarm the family. Early that following morning, before anyone even knew that Shawn was missing yet, the school got a call telling them that Shawn was moving and he would no longer be attending school. The school reported that it sounded like an older woman on the phone, and she identified herself as Shawn's grandmother, that Shawn was moving away to Washington State and would no longer be attending school there. This was alarming for many reasons. For starters, the call was definitely not his grandmother, and while his grandmother did live in Washington State at one point, she had moved back to California months before. He was really close with her, and he was very worried about her recently because she'd been fighting cancer. She passed away, never knowing what happened to her grandson. It left the Betz family wondering if whoever was involved in whatever happened to Shawn knew old information, because she did at one point live in Washington, or if Shawn purposely gave the caller wrong information in hopes of sending some sort of a signal to his family. Unfortunately, this was long before the days of caller ID, and to this day, no one knows who the caller was or why they made the call. The most alarming part of the call is, of course, that the caller had to be in some way involved, since no one yet knew he was gone. Out of options with the police at the time, the Betz family pushed hard to get local media sites to cover the case. However, they were told that he was listed as a runaway, and this unfortunately had an unexpected side effect. No media, whether print, radio, or TV, would touch it. So instead, the Betzes spent hours walking the area, placing flyers on cars and going door to door, asking if anyone had seen Shawn. A witness did come forward thanks to his effort, a woman who worked at a local beauty supply place that was located near the Pizza Chalet. She reported seeing him late that evening, walking along with an older adolescent male, although there's no confirmation as to whether or not it was the Pizza Chalet's son that she saw with him or somebody else. When she was re-questioned later, she wasn't quite as positive about what she had seen. I spoke to Shawn's childhood friend, Kevin, and asked him about the boy that Shawn was. He told me he was a funny kid with a great sense of humor. He was always ready with a laugh and a mischievous smile. Kevin had some medical issues, and he was really isolated. His father coached Little League, and their home was located across the street from Shawn. Because he was somewhat isolated, and because kids sometimes saw his challenges, things weren't all that easy for Kevin. But Shawn saw him for who he was. He was just his friend. The loss of Shawn greatly impacted Kevin. It's also a reminder that things like this hurt so much more than just the family. The loss is felt by the entire community. After about 4 months passed, the detective arrived back on the scene. At some point, this police officer was demoted back to a beat cop, but for now, he was still the detective following Shawn's case. It was a relief when they finally started looking for clues to Shawn's whereabouts. The unfortunate thing was that 4 months had passed, and it pretty much ensured any clues were gone. Shawn's story did at least make the local newspaper, but it was little more than a blurb because he was still listed as a runaway. The local Walmart, however, offered up a board of photos of Shawn in hopes of helping find him. The news stations again refused to run anything on the case as he was still listed as a runaway. Plus, 4 months had passed and it's no longer a breaking news story. The designation to endangered missing wouldn't happen for years. This new flurry of activity, however, may have sent off an unintentional concern for the owners of the Pizza Chalet. The Betz family told me they were in shock when at the same time they learned that the pizza owner suddenly packed up the shop and moved away from the area, just as the questions about Shawn were starting. The police were eventually able to track them to Los Angeles, but by the time they found them there, they had moved again, this time out of the country, believed to possibly be a Middle Eastern location. The police told the Betz family there was no extradition treaty from wherever it was that they were at, and the owner was out of reach. There is, of course, no way to know if they were fleeing the police questioning them, but it felt very suspicious to the family left behind, especially since they quickly moved twice in such a short amount of time. Another sad result of this is that the name of the young man working the counter that night was also gone. There was no way to find this employee to question him. When the Pizza Chalet was questioned originally, they just spoke to the owners about when Shawn left. To the family, this was a crushing blow. They felt like the biggest lead was lost. But I ran into something by accident that shocked Shawn's sister. A former detective spoke to us off the record, saying he worked the case later on, but he was unaware of the existence of the Pizza Chalet owners at all. Now, it's possible he just doesn't remember their involvement because time has passed and he's no longer working on the case. But it helped illustrates for the family why they were so upset with the police involvement at the time. The former detective also mentioned that there was no evidence Shawn's older brother was involved, but said there was a lot of suspicion. That is another huge issue in this case that greatly upsets the Betz family. They told me that the police, for some unknown reason, set their sights on Shawn's then 15-year-old brother. I'm withholding his name from this video because there's nothing to indicate he was anything but a victim of collateral damage, a victim who also had a rock-solid alibi for that night. Shawn's brother was 4 years older than Shawn, but the two boys were close, and because the older brother had an anxiety disorder, he was already struggling with the loss of Shawn. This was amplified when the police chief picked up the underage teen without informing the family and transported him to the police station to interrogate him. By the time his family learned where he was, they raced to the station. He'd already been questioned for about 5 hours. By the time they arrived, the young man had already been given a polygraph, which he failed. He was being screamed at that they knew it was his fault, and he was ordered to write out a confession. His sister told me that by then, he just wanted to leave and he was willing to sign anything to make that happen. Sadly, this is one of those things that you hear about in a lot of different stories. However, his family is clear the police took advantage of the young man's anxiety, and it's caused severe PTSD throughout the rest of his life. Factors such as anxiety can affect polygraph results. making the technique susceptible to error, and this is in part why polygraphs aren't accepted in court. It's also questionable why they gave him a polygraph without letting his legal guardians know, much less even being questioned. The biggest issue, and the reason the false confession and polygraph results went nowhere, is the teen was on stage with his band Manta, playing in San Francisco at the time Shawn went missing. This venue was, in fact, 7 hours away. It's clear it was absolutely impossible for the boy to be both on stage and involved. His family has no idea why the police began focusing on him. What is possibly worse, however, is that the locals in the area knew the police viewed him as a suspect and had interrogated him. As a result, there has been a huge black cloud of suspicion hovering around the now adult man to this day, and as a result, it continues to severely impact his mental health. People in the community still actively believe he had something to do with this, despite the fact he has this alibi. It wasn't the last negative encounter with the police, however, and the next time likely resulted from the black cloud that interrogation left in the minds of the people in the city. In 1991, a large number of police descended upon the Betz home at 6 a.m. with a search warrant and bloodhounds. They refused to even explain why they were there. The family was quite understandably horrified and upset. In fact, one of Shawn's sisters was there with her newborn twins. For hours, the police combed their home from 6 a.m. to 8 or 9 p.m., using cadaver dogs to try to locate Shawn's remains. It would be months before they would even learn why the police were there. It turns out someone in the community called in an anonymous tip, stating they knew Shawn was buried underneath the rental home his family lived in. That is what led to that traumatic raid. Shawn's sister describes the police interaction as harassing and condescending. For a full day, the police searched and probed every accessible area under the house, which is understandable. If they had a tip, they had to follow it up. However, the problem was that they were not kind to the family at all while this was happening, never taking into consideration that the anonymous tip might not have been truthful. Even after the search, when they came up empty, their involvement felt combative. His sister described the tip as devastating, sick, and demented. It's unclear to them why the police took the tip at face value, treating the family as they did when searching. No question they had to follow through, it's just the way that it was done. Over the years, this case has had a very small footprint. It's not even one I would have chosen to cover because it had so little information available. It's one photograph of Shawn and a blurb of information about him going missing. But Shawn is so much more than that one paragraph. The most exposure this case received was being one of the missing kids featured in the Soul Asylum video for Runaway Train. For those who aren't familiar with the video itself, it was a little bit like the Milk Carton Kids campaign, but on steroids. There were multiple versions of the video, featuring in total 36 missing and endangered children. All in all, it was a pretty successful campaign, and of the 36 children, 26 were located. Andrea Bowman was the most recent found. Shawn, unfortunately, is still one of the remaining 10 kids missing from that video who have not been found. There's a link in the description below to the story of the Soul Asylum video. As for Shawn's story, inclusion in the video was a thankful surprise, and they only learned of it when someone called them after seeing it. But it was a welcome addition to the television coverage. In fact, it felt like a blessing. The producer was extremely kind to the family and even offered comp tickets to a local Soul Asylum show. There was one final strange occurrence regarding this case. Shawn's sister Pam, who was 17 when Shawn went missing, grew up to have twin boys. One of the young men eventually grew up themselves and became a security guard. He was at his job one evening and a man approached him and they began chatting. He was an older man and he mentioned living in Upland, California, and the young man casually mentioned in response that that's where his uncle's from, but that he went missing. Despite not mentioning Shawn's name, the elderly man became animated and offered up the name himself, and rattling off other facts the man knew about the case. Her son described the exchange as unsettling, and they're not sure today who that man was or why. The thing about this case is that a lot has happened not just with this video, but off-screen. I feel blessed to have been slightly involved in this. This case was brought to me by a subscriber named Steve who has the channel Commercial Forest. He lived in Upland and suggested I cover it, but he managed to arrange for me to be able to speak with the Betz family. He wasn't done though. He also presented the case himself at a town council meeting and moved the mayor to tears. There's a link to the full meeting below. Shawn's mother, Barbara, spoke first.
I mean, it's been almost 34 years. I need some closure. His father died not knowing what happened to him. His grandmother died not knowing what happened to him. And I need help from anybody that knows anything or can assist in finding out what happened to my son. An 11-year-old child just doesn't get up and vanish.
Steve, or Commercial Forest, also spoke, offering information on this channel and making suggestions for solving the case.
His mother, Barbara, sisters Pamela and Crystal are listening tonight, as you just heard from two of them. Public information about Shawn's case is extremely limited and vague. Next month, on January 20th, 2022, the 34th anniversary of Shawn's disappearance, the Crimehound channel is releasing an episode about Shawn's cold case with cooperation from both the Betz family and a former Upland police detective who handled the case. I am certain that countless hours and resources have been devoted to Shawn's case, much more than it appears from the outside looking in. However, working in silence while keeping the public in the dark is a very old Upland way of doing things. When things don't go according to plan, it breeds mistrust. The public perception is that Shawn's case has either been forgotten or is in some kind of bureaucratic purgatory, being reshuffled every few years as kind of a formality. With each year that passes, answers get a little further out of reach, and I don't know that we can give them the answers they want. However, I'd sleep better at night knowing that we were doing everything in our power to try. Let's work together to get some long overdue answers for the Betz family. Thank you.
At the request of the family, the premiere date of this video was moved in hopes they would be able to share more photos with me. It was an honor to be a part of this. The chief of police and a local reporter were also in attendance at the meeting. Another thing is the involvement of the Inland Valley Daily Bulletin, which is part of a Southern California news group serving millions. A reporter named Steve Scauzillo was at the town council meeting that night. It's pretty amazing at what started out as a random comment has turned into something that may help this case. The article that was written by Steve Scauzillo is linked below. As for the other Steve, you can find a link to Steve's YouTube channel, Commercial Forest. There will be an interview with the police located there after this video premieres. Please consider subscribing to his channel. It's important to mention, although I highlighted some negative interactions with the police, that was not anybody that's working there now. The current chief of police spoke to both Steves, as well as the family, and they are trying to find answers for the Betz family. The police have been wonderful about this. The best part of this is that new people are looking at Shawn's case through new eyes. And Steve was such a huge part of this happening. There have been 4 photos that were age progressed, showing what Shawn might look like today if he's still alive. Shawn's father passed away without ever finding out what happened to his son. His mother is now 73 and in poor health. She desperately needs to finally know what happened to Shawn. There are so many questions that need to be answered. If you know anything, you can always contact Crime Stoppers anonymously, and I've provided that number. I also included the contact information for the police. Shawn has been missing for 33 years. If he's still alive, he would be 44 today. I will leave you with the words from Shawn's sister.
Please, somebody knows something. Come forward. It's time for closure. My mom has the right to know what happened to her son.